You know what's so funny? Because this lawnmower guy comes cruising by us. He says, we're walking. He says, you know what's so funny? He says, you're trying to make that grass all look like it's going the same direction and it's all the same height. He says, what I think is so hilarious is that God's playing a trick on them because they're mowing that thing every day. And go put your face down close to that grass. I put my face down close to the grass. He said, look at the direction that the grass is going. Go do it sometime. Go look at all that grass. It's all going the same direction. And you get down close to it, and it's going every direction. Why? Because we can't control God. We can't landscape God into perfection. So God's perfection comes to earth in Jesus. God's perfect way of saving us. Right? And I want you to turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. But I'm just going to read a little verse about Jesus. And I'm going to read that passage out of Hebrews. This is beautiful. Just listen to this. I don't want you to turn to both of them. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, Hebrews 12:1 says, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. This is God. This is Jesus. You know, I mean, I'm telling you right now, if Jesus walked in this room or walked in most churches in America today, he would be shameful. He's the perfecter of our faith. He showed us the way of perfection. What's the way of perfection? That we see what God sees? That we say what God says? That when we see something, we listen long enough to know, well, what's God's mind on this? What's God's heart on this? What's the way that you made this person to be? God, do you want the weeds and the flowers to grow together? Or do you want us to uproot all the weeds and throw them out in the garbage so that we only have one? Or do you want the daisies and the roses to grow together? Or do you want us just to get rid of everything because we only like roses in this church? And so God says, I want to open your heart and understanding to the true perfection of faith. You know, we bore each other. Most of us are bored in the church because we're trying to be too perfect. We bore ourselves, with our own things that we like. Don't we? That's why you get married. I don't want to be married. I'm not married to my wife because she's just like me. And the very thing that you fight against is the very thing that you want. It's the very thing that you desire. And actually in the garden, it's the very thing that makes you healthy. I live in Sherwood Forest. Years ago, I live in Shorewood, but they named it after Sherwood Forest. And I was with this old man walking down the street in Shorewood where we live. And we live on a boulevard. And he said, he said to me, he said, you know, son, this boulevard, you know what it used to be when I was here, when I was growing up? I said, what? He said, it used to all be elm trees. He said, and somebody came in and they made all elm trees all along these boulevards. I think it was like maybe 50 years ago. He said, I was just a boy. He said, and then what happened is Dutch elm came through and it killed all the trees. They lost every tree. Every tree along this boulevard, it was gone. They took every tree out. There were no trees here. He said, so what they started to do is they started to make one tree an elm tree, one tree an oak tree, so that and so on, maple tree, and it just goes so on. So when you go through that area now, it's such a strong forest because of the diversity of the types of trees. So Dutch elm right now, for instance, is rolling again through the Midwest. And we won't lose all of our trees. We might lose a few, but we won't lose all of them. Because it's a strong forest, because it's not all just Dutch elm. And that's what God does things in the body. And then he said something that was interesting. He said, and because you keep a Dutch elm next to maybe 3 or 4 different other trees before it's next to another Dutch elm, when that Dutch elm gets its disease, it's more unlikely that that Dutch elm will attack that tree. Because the trees that are around it that are different give it protection. Isn't that unbelievable? I say all that to say that Jesus came to show us what it truly meant to be perfect in faith, to be perfected like God is perfect. Man, we should be the most creative people on the face of the planet. There's no doubt about it, don't you think? We should be so creative. We should be like nothing, no fear of man ever stops us. We should definitely not be boring, eh? We should definitely not try to be man-pleasing. We should be like so creative. Jesus disregarded the shame. What was so shameful? That he didn't look perfect. He didn't look like the Messiah that Israel wanted. He didn't look like a hero. You know, I'm finding through the years, the more often that somebody walks through and preaches a sermon and they look like a hero, they're usually not. Some of the most unbelievable sermons that have touched my life have been the ones that have ached me the most, frustrated me the most. I remember when I was in a service with a friend of mine, Lou Engle. I'm sitting in a service and he's talking for 2.5 hours about our nation. Maybe 3. We were in kind of a seeker-sensitive church. And they all came to see the guy with the crazy voice, you know. Ah! Well, they could only handle him for about a half hour. Some people are too holy to handle. They just couldn't handle it. Those weak, pathetic Christians. Boring. I'll tell you what, man. I've been so many places with Lou Engle. He's fighting for life. I believe he is a world changer. I've been so many places with Lou Engle where the room is empty. He comes places and nobody comes. Oh yeah, all kinds of people loved him when he was doing the call because he had a platform and a lot of people. I'll tell you what, man. When he started doing the no people, I saw what the Christian church is made of. There's nobody I'd rather be with in the roughest time in America than Lou Engle. I'd rather be with him than any big preacher, any big singer, any popular Christian. It's got all their little puppets. So there's a greater glory that God has.